Well, depending on who you talk to, the city of Providence is doing pretty well, or not.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
We haven't really honed in on the city of Providence in the last couple of weeks worth of programs. And of course, the State of the City address was offered by Mayor Elorza, and I commented on that when he offered it a week and a half or so ago. But Sam Zurier, the councilman from the 2nd Ward in Providence, is here to raise some questions. And he put an op-ed piece out recently that I thought was quite interesting in the way he approached it. He's got thoughts on that, education funding, whether the mayor ought to be freely traveling, and all that kind of a thing. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Nice to have you in. Thank you for joining me on my State of Mind. Let us go to the rundown and kind of check on things that happened this weekend. Yeah, rolling. He's rolling along. Here's another victory headline for Donald Trump. Now remember, these are proportional delegates, so don't get yourself all excited. Of course, pretty soon you're just going to be tired of Donald Trump winning and winning and winning, and America winning, of course.
But we're going to win. Oh, are we going to win? You're going to get so tired of winning. You're going to get so tired. You're going to say, please, please, Mr. President, we can't stand it anymore. We don't want to keep winning. We can't stand it.
You know, there are times when I watch him and I have nothing to say, which is kind of a professional liability. But anyway, okay, Donald. But of course, you know, his behavior is always about finding people to whack or getting into serious confrontations. Have you seen this? There's a woman, Marlene Ricketts, who's the billionaire wife of the founder of Ameritrade, who's dumped in $3 million on, you know, these ads that cast questions about Donald Trump. And of course, he fights back. Here's his latest tweet. Hey, I hear the Ricketts family spending secret money against me. They better be careful. They got a lot to hide. I'm guessing so too to you, Donald, but we'll see. In the meantime, the behavior continues, and how he came up with this one is beyond me. Oh, Twitter, that's how he gets, right? Because most of the stuff he brings us comes from Twitter. Did you see this? Trump questions Rubio's eligibility. This wouldn't be Ted Cruz. This would be Mr. Rubio because of this tweet that came out. This is a retweet. Some knucklehead suggests that both Cruz and Rubio are ineligible. Marco Rubio was born in the United States of America, and he's more than 35 years of age. Check, check, he's eligible. But the Donald says, well, you know, I retweeted it because it helps me start a conversation, and it becomes very interesting. He's like Eddie Haskell. You know, I don't know, I just retweet, you know, like retweeting. Anyway, Tom Nichols, professor, conservative, who was here on the broadcast a few weeks ago, lamenting the idea that Donald Trump is even in this race, explained it to me on the radio today.
Part of the problem is that Trump counts on his voters being low information voters. He counts on them not really knowing the difference, for example, between Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio's backgrounds. He says, well, you know, Hispanic names, everybody has trouble, you know, with this stuff. I'm going to just throw it out there that maybe he'll have trouble being a legitimate, you know, legal candidate for president. And he counts on people, many of whom admit they've never even voted before, saying, oh, well, if, you know, Donald Trump said it, maybe there's something to it.
Here's the thing. I don't think it's just low information voters. I mean, there are plenty of people who have paid attention, who are fed up and think, what the heck? Why not? We'll take a flyer. But without the low information voters, he wouldn't be where he is. And all you got to do is just kind of do the research to know that. Where this thing goes, I have no guess at this point. Remember, it's a shared delegate count up until the 15th of March, and that's when it becomes, you win by any margin, you get all the delegates. That's when the counting really is going to be profound. Of course, Jeb Bush left the race this weekend. Good effort, Jeb. Good riddance. Thank you. We need to narrow this field, and soon. Alrighty, bomb threats on a completely different playing field here. One in Boston, or a couple in Boston today. Barrington High School is evacuated. Last week we found that this teenager allegedly had been involved in a series of them. The state police is all over it.
There's a lot of parents on edge, obviously, and especially in the Newport area, and it really taxes the fire and police responders. Continually going back to the high school. It's a big cost, shutting down the high school, searching the high school. So there's a lot of factors in play when a bomb threat is called in.
Yeah, hey, listen, you know, we've had worries about terrorism being involved in this, that you never know which one is going to be the one. So from, you know, a level of international terrorism to what we used to call the old-fashioned terror in the neighborhood, you know, the kid that just likes to pull pranks, you've got this whole thing, the whole spectrum. I just hope that the kids are able to communicate inside the school buildings that this isn't funny. We got enough to worry about without having to worry about this. Mom, Dad, talk to your kids about this. It's okay to say in the lunchroom, it's not cool. You know, it's not cool for some Rhode Islanders. Every 10 years, they look for their new license plate. That's what the law is. This headline is disappointing to many today in the Providence Journal. State pushes back the wishing. Let's put it this way. The DMV computers are so screwed up that they can't take advantage of some systemization, synchronization that they want to do going from the old plate to the new plate. Let me see the new plates. I got to tell you, I can wait. Right? Yeah. You guys? I'm not going to lose sleep over that. Are you? Other than the mandate that we're supposed to change our plates on a regular basis. Jeaner is looking for a little time. On this one, no rush. In the meantime, last week or so, we had a proclamation from the mayor of the city of Providence that things are really good.
2016 is going to be a good year for the city. We're poised for a resurgence. We're going to see more construction projects than this city has seen in decades.
Line. One of the councilors said, I'm not so sure. Now, Councilor, welcome back to the broadcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you. You didn't write the headline.
No, I didn't.
You wrote the piece. You like to distinguish between the two.
Yes, I do. I said in the piece that I think the glass is half empty and it's half full. And my issue was that the state of the city did not give a balanced picture. It didn't tell both sides of the city's condition.
Because, well, it was widely cheered as a very optimistic presentation by the mayor.
Yes, and he announced some very useful initiatives. He announced initiatives in education and construction. He announced an initiative in foreclosures. So he had some very good things to say, and the city has a bright future.
You, in your op-ed piece, used an interesting analogy. Of course, with the passing of Buddy Cianci, there was just so much conversation about thumbs up, thumbs down, and it really was I think the city of Providence is still reeling from the loss of Buddy Cianci. Anytime a profound public figure is lost, it's a jolt. His is especially jolting. But you used it, I think, profoundly to pivot to the budget address and the State of the City address by the mayor. Tell me what your thinking was there.
Exactly. You had in Mayor Cianci someone of great accomplishments and great misdeeds, all bound up in the same person. And some of the impetus that led him to his greatness also led him to his greatest failures. So when people were trying to separate out the one person into two, neither side was conveying the total reality. And similarly with the city of Providence, the mayor did an excellent job talking about our bright future, talking about our resurgence. However, to get there, we have significant financial issues today which we need to solve if we want to realize that bright future of the future.
And one of those, just one of them, is the fire deal, which we've spent a lot of time talking about here. He seems to be going full steam, thinking he's going to get this, a switch of direction by the Rhode Island State Supreme Court, which would legitimize his effort to move from 4 platoons to 3 platoons with the firefighters, a la what happened in North Kingstown. He continues to think that he's going to win this case when most people who are watching it think he's going to get zapped, and how he gets zapped, meaning how the city gets zapped financially, will be determined by the timeline of that case, correct?
Yes, there is, right now, there's a question as to whether we'll see resolution of that case by the courts and the arbitrators before the beginning of next year. The internal auditor estimated this could be, the downside could be as much as $9.5 million a year. So multiply that by 1.5 or 2, and you see a large contingent liability. just to pick up on your comparison with North Kingstown, I think there's an important difference between how they handled their court case and how the city is handling its. More specifically, North Kingstown set aside money in reserves to pay for a potential loss. They had it all lined up in a savings account, and they didn't realize the savings until they won the court case and had a settlement with the firefighters for a contract going both backwards and forwards in time. In contrast, we don't have reserves in Providence. We're flying without a parachute, and without any reserves, the impact of a loss could be that much more extreme.
10, 15, $20 million on the wrong side of this the longer this case goes, and nobody's getting a nosebleed right now in terms of the briefs and the timetable for the Supreme Court. So whereas you'd like this case decided by summertime, I don't think it's going to happen.
It may not. The original decision by the Superior Court was in September, and in theory, if the lawyers had worked together, it may have been possible to get all of the proceedings cleared away in the Superior Court and then get the case up to the Supreme Court, get all the briefs in, so that the Supreme Court could hear the case in May or June of this year. If that timetable had been met, we may have had a decision from the Supreme Court by the end of the summer. That may still be possible, but it's getting more and more difficult with every passing day.
It could be a ticking time bomb.
Well, again, if the city is successful in winning the case, that won't happen. If the city is successful in negotiating a settlement, that won't happen. But one of the things I think would be valuable in terms of having an imminent decision by the court is that it would create a sense of urgency in the parties. School negotiations often go down to the opening day of school. If we had a deadline from the courts, maybe that would give the parties the urgency that has that would cause a settlement that's eluded us so far.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of the financial matters, and then the councilor's got some important ideas on education that we'll talk about too. Stay with us.
Where we are as a city.
Councilman Salvatore's resolution was flat out defeated by the council without being sent to a committee for discussion. It would have banned out-of-state travel paid for by the city until the $13.4 million deficit is paid off.
There's no precedent.
Majority Leader Kevin Jackson led the charge against the travel ban, calling Salvatore's resolution a political move, pointing out previous administrations have had budget deficits and no one tried to ban travel then.
I want to know the reasoning why there was no red flags, there was no emergency to stop travel at that point, but there is now.
Documents obtained by Target 12 through a public records request detail $54,000 worth of city-funded expenses for out-of-state travel for Mayor Elorza and his aides during his first year in office. The trips include China, San Francisco, Guatemala, and London.
I would never tell the mayor that he should or should not travel outside of the state of Rhode Island.
Salvatore says the funding for those trips should come from donors and special interest groups, not taxpayers. And he denied that his proposed travel ban was a political move.
I would tell those folks to start following the city's finances a little closer, and then they would probably understand why it's so critical to save every penny at this point.
I got my own worry about what Councilor Salvatore is trying to do. What's your take on the overall concept?
Well, I think that he wanted to address the fact that in a time of fiscal stress, we have to look at every expense and see where there can be savings.
You supported his ordinance effort there?
Well, I voted in favor of it. I don't know if it was with great enthusiasm, but I wanted to stand with him. I had introduced a separate ordinance several months before. It's still pending in committee, which would upgrade the reporting on travel. And I think that would be a better way as an interim measure to get a handle on this issue.
Upgrade how?
Well, I wanted reports to be sent to the internal auditor, or to the clerk, excuse me, regarding all planned trips, what the expense would be, who was taking them, and who was in charge. We actually had a situation, the China trip, where both the mayor and the chief operating officer were away, and none of us knew it. So it was not clear who was in charge. So another thing I was looking for was some information about the chain of command when travel takes place.
You know, Councilor Salvatore is suggesting that special interest groups and the like can fund it. I go, whoa, 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 whoa. Not unlike the governor's controversy when she went to Switzerland, the URI Foundation was asked to pay for that. Hey, look, you know, if a head of state, governor, even mayor of a big city like Providence, wants to travel for reasons that he thinks or she thinks benefit the taxpayers, put it in the budget and pay for it. it's a taxpayer expense. If you can prove it not to be a junket, because there could be a return on investment, well, heck, go at it. When we start shoveling special interests and and favors and processes that are off a diligent review, I think then we're in trouble, don't you?
Well, I'm actually trying to study the funding of this because some of it was done under the auspices of the Providence Tourism Council, which are businesses supporting economic development. Now, it's not entirely clear. I haven't learned enough about their mission or how they operate, but there may be opportunities where nonprofit groups. Bryant University was in China. I think Bryant contributed to the expense of that trip to China, and as part of it, they visited China. With that said, I think you're absolutely right. It does raise issues, and it has to be watched closely.
Yeah, look, if you again, not to belabor the point, we've elected officials, governors, mayors have become so gun shy over criticism that what they say at least, hey, listen, I found them. It's not the taxpayers aren't paying for it. I found the money over here. Well, you know what? Long run, finding the money over here could be more detrimental to the service of the taxpayers. If you have a reason to travel on behalf of the taxpayers, even if it's a marketing or investigation agenda, then legitimize it. Seems to me. So I think you're on the right track in taking a look at those expenses. What else, before we get to some of your school stuff, what else is burning in your craw about worry about expense for the city of Providence right now?
Well, we have a revaluation coming up, and there will be issues about how the taxes will be allocated. And there's some interest groups that are jockeying right now to affect the allocation of the taxes. And I'm concerned that some of them are lobbying, but they aren't registered as lobbyists. And I'd like to see the lobbyist registration law revised so that all of them are captured in their reporting as part of the city's open government program.
Speaking of taxation and economic development, maybe I've missed something, but I've yet to see a sturdy, consistent rate card from the city of Providence for investment 195 or elsewhere. It seems to me that if you published a rate card that was one for all for one, all comers, fair, consistent, it would accelerate this alleged growth that's going to happen in the city, some of which may be phantom without it. Am I on the right track?
Yes, it took me a while to get there because early in my first term, there was a developer who wanted to put up student apartments who did not need a subsidy. And they screamed, it won't be built unless we have a subsidy. Well, we didn't give them a subsidy, it still got built. But I've become convinced that was kind of the exception that proves the rule, and that if we had a standardized program, it would actually relieve a lot of the aggravation that goes on with this haggling right now with these tax programs.
Yeah, I think there's a level of consistency that's necessary across the board in Rhode Island, not just in the city of Providence. When we come back, you've got some ideas on school funding and the like, and I want to hear them. Stay with us. Let me tell you, education and education funding are going to heat up in a big way over the next couple of years around here. Here was a headline at the Go Local Prov website, a guest op-ed by Councilman Zurier, who's writing a lot. He's in the Providence Journal, he's online. It's good. It's, you know what, because governing by headline is not such a smart thing. So I applaud that you're writing a little bit about the things that matter to you.
I appreciate that people read it and share feedback.
I hope they read it. You know, people aren't reading as much as they should, but they need to. Best way to ensure quality public education for all Rhode Islanders is to lead here in one fell swoop. What do you think it is?
I'd like to see a constitutional right to education that can be enforced in Rhode Island's courts.
Meaning?
Meaning that people could go to court, present their case, and the Constitution would say there's a right to an adequate public education, and there would be hearings in court to determine what that means and how to provide for it.
Is that busy legal mumbo constitutional work, or are you trying to drive the conversation to a new set of standards that everybody agrees to?
Well, first of all, this is the mainstream position nationally. Rhode Island is actually one of the few states in the country that does not have a judicially enforceable right to education in its Constitution. And there were actually a couple of court cases where one court found perhaps we do, but it was reversed by the Supreme Court 20 years ago, and it was also reviewed by the court 2 years ago.
But the language is missing means what to us, in the trenches?
Yeah, when education is being decided in a political body, it's often the case that the rights of the grown-ups, the prerogatives of the grown-ups, are being weighed out in a pluralistic process.
Meaning the unions?
There are numbers of stakeholders. There are unions, there are school committees, there are educators. Everybody has a free-for-all in there, but not necessarily the kids. In a setting, in a courtroom, there would be an advocate for the children, and the court would be looking at what is the best interest of the children.
And that would manifest itself. Give me an example of how you think that would manifest itself where the dynamic changes from what we've had in terms of the norm and the status quo so far.
Well, for example, there are certain standard components of funding formulas one sees nationally that don't appear in Rhode Island. And the governor recently convened a working group, and Rhode Island began making incremental steps towards the national direction. Very good that we did that, but every year we're losing another generation of kids. And if it takes so long to get that way through the political process, a court can look at what the right solution is based on what's best for the children.
Do you want judges making decisions about what's best for children?
Well, not necessarily. The best that can happen is when a constitutional right provides political cover for the legislators to become statesmen. That is exactly what happened in 1993 in Massachusetts. Everybody applauds the Massachusetts Education Reform Act of 1993. It came on the heels of a Supreme Judicial Court decision that spring announcing a constitutional right to education. That gave the legislators the political cover to enact what was called a grand bargain, where resources and accountability were combined. And all the stakeholders were there ready to give something up because they knew they had to.
How does this work for the students of Providence?
Well, in Providence, we have children who suffer from a number of disadvantages, who need extra programs, be it programs to learn the English language, people who come from broken families, who need support in terms of counselors. We have students with all kinds of needs, some who've immigrated from other countries and come in 12 years old.
So that means more money.
Well, it's partly resources, but it's also accountability, because the obligation is to the child. And in theory, a court, and this has happened in other states, can say that the school district is not serving the child properly, and then the court has authority over the school district to say you have to change your programs to be more accountable to children. So it can lead in a number of directions. Resources was a major component in Massachusetts, but it's not by any means the only issue that can be reviewed in the court.
Right. When we're going to have a lot of education forums over the course of the next few months. We'll have you back to elaborate a little bit more, because there's no doubt the difference in quality of education between Rhode Island and Massachusetts, for instance, is here and here right now.
Yes, and if you look at the graph, I actually included this in my op-ed, they were around here in 1993, and then after the court case and the statute, they went like that.
All right, good to see you. Appreciate your thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
Final word when we come back. Already coming up on the program tomorrow, a conversation about a population that my producer Lexi tells me is not getting enough representation. So tune in for that. We shall be back with you tomorrow night, of course, and I'll see you on the radio at noon on WPRO, weekdays noon to 3. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.